think I'm a little bit the outsider. I come from left field because until I was invited to speak at this conference, to be honest, I didn't really know what transmedia was. So being Generation Y, I naturally went to Wikipedia, and this is what I found. And to be honest, it didn't really help very much. It's very dry, isn't it, really? But actually, I'm learning today some wonderful, wonderful talks today, and I'm really beginning to understand. But I guess what I was able to pick up from the TEDxTransmedia website and other resources, that it's still actually about storytelling. And I think this is what we're all about here today. But I then started to think about the objectives of storytelling. What are we trying to achieve? Well, I guess first of all, we're trying to cut through and get ourselves noticed and get our story through to our audience, whoever that may be. We want it to create an emotional impact, of course, and ultimately we want it to stick. We want people to remember that story and to take that message with them into their lives. My challenge to you today is beyond transmedia, is to dare to sense and to dare to think about the possibility of taking those messages across beyond words and pictures into the other senses, so smell and taste and touch. And I'm going to be looking at some of the reasons why I think that's really important to consider. We'll finish with a few brief examples. This is a new area, and it's an area where I think, has huge potential and possibilities. And I just want to open our eyes and our noses and our mouths to this possibility. I'll start with a little story of when I was a student, obviously not very long ago, 25 odd years ago. And in my tutorial group, there was a girl that I really loved and adored. And I think this is the greatest story of them all. It's the basic human story about our need to love and to be loved. And of course, if she was going to fall in love with me as I thought I was with her, she had to notice me. And if she noticed me, then hopefully she would like me. And if she liked me, then hopefully she'd fall in love with me. And then hopefully that would be forever, because I was a bit of a soppy romantic, but very shy. And actually there's a sub-context to that. Because I was a poor student, I couldn't afford a car, so I hoped she'd love my motorbike too. So this is the story. Jump forward about 10 years, and I was a young, thrusting, dynamic businessman, and I was on my first business trip to Tokyo. Has anyone been to Tokyo? I'm sure you'll agree that if you arrive in Tokyo as a young person, you are just completely amazed by the visual overload, the visual messages that are surrounding you down any street in Tokyo. And not only that, it was a completely alien language to me, so I just couldn't understand any of it. Totally overwhelmed. And jump forward another 5 years when I was working in marketing, which is now my chosen career. I'm a branding specialist. And this is what I was seeing in a typical retail environment. And can you see the parallel between that street in Tokyo? And this is typical supermarket, tens of thousands of products, all competing for our attention, all wanting to be noticed through our eyes. And so this got me thinking, there's got to be a better way of doing this. How can we cut through? Actually, what we find is that 83% of all the information that we receive as human beings is actually appealing only to our eyes alone. I think that's astounding. Not only that, if we look at sort of typical recall figures for advertising and things like that, it's been in freefall because markets and individuals, the media is much more fragmented, which is a good thing in many ways, of course, that's what we're talking about. But how on earth do you get to your audience? And how do you get them to remember you, remember our original objectives? And I suspect that girl in my tutorial group, her recall of me has also done the same thing. I still remember her, that's sad, isn't it? Not only that, I'll just play you
our little dragon, sitting on the window ledge. But look what happens the minute we move. His head twists and turns to follow us as we move around the room. It's all an illusion, of course. He's not really moving at all. It's a version of the hollow face illusion, but it's a very powerful effect. And not just side to side. If we move up and down, again his head cranes to follow us. But our brain has made an assumption about the structure of the dragon's head. And if we move far enough around to the side, we suddenly realize the structure is different and the illusion fails.
What's happening is that the visual signals that we're receiving through our eyes is going to the part of our brain called the cortex, and that's the outer part of our brain, which is primarily responsible for interpreting signals. It's a rational part of our brain. And that, as you've just seen, we can misinterpret. So we've got vision overload and we can misinterpret. Ooh, a little bit scary. When I started to look at this area from a marketing point of view...
Here's our little dragon.
That's what I wanted. We've seen a lot of this, that the old marketing model, from a marketing point of view, the old communication model was about talk at, sell to, it was fixed, it was mass media, and it was two-dimensional. And this is the area I want to look at, 2D words and to a certain extent pictures. And it was intrusive. And it was about what I call, from a marketing point of view, negotiated acceptance. Here I am, here's my proposition. You as an audience, you either accept or reject it. You turn away. And we've seen falling recalls. So something clearly has to change. And I started to look at this in a little bit more detail. Suffice to say, a colleague of mine, we wrote a book and we did one of the biggest pieces of research into this whole area. How as human beings do we receive the messages that are passed to us? This was with the marketing bent to it. So this is marketing data. And I'll just share with you the very, very top level findings that we had. Is that when we looked from a sensory point of view, which senses were important to our relationship to brands, and that can be audience, we see that the senses are actually quite imbalanced. Yes, of course, we are visual beings. There's no getting away from that. But look at smell and taste and touch. They're really not that far behind, and there's a sense of balance there, isn't there? There's a holistic feeling to the way we're receiving these messages. And yet, frighteningly, when we compared that aspect of our human existence with how marketing budgets were spent on the other side, you can see there's this huge over-reliance in the senses of sight and to a certain extent sound, words and pictures. And it's this area that I've been working on for the last 20-odd years, and it's my passion. I believe fervently that we need to be thinking about relating to the other senses. So this comes back to my challenge to you here today. What can we do to extend our reach and our emotional connection into the other senses? And there's more of a reason than that as well. And to demonstrate this, I'd like you all to imagine that you're single. I'm sure none of you are single. You're all very wonderful, attractive human beings, but some of you may be. So imagine, go back to that time when you were single. I go back to that time I was in the tutorial group. And you might go into a party. So imagine you're going into a party now, and you'll see someone across the other side of the room. You're using your eyes as sort of a screening mechanism. And you might see someone who looks really attractive. And you might have had a glass of wine, you'll be feeling a bit confident, and you'll go up and you'll start to talk to them. And, at that point you might think, well, they're a bit of an idiot, or they might think you're an idiot, I guess. But if you're getting on well, you're building up a bit of a rapport, it's starting to develop a relationship a bit here, maybe. If the evening's going well, you'll hold their hand and you'll lead them onto the dance floor and you'll get up close and personal, and you might then smell their wonderful fragrance. And if the evening's going really well, at the end of the night, you might get to taste them with a kiss, of course. Don't get ahead of me here. And as it is with our human relationships, I think it's exactly true to our relationships between products and brands and individuals, but also us as storytellers and the messages that we want to get across. And particularly that most important of message, that story of love, which we see here. And why is this important? We know some of the research that I do with places like Oxford University, we can see that, yes, of course, vision has a great innate ability to change our mood, positively or negatively, of course, as does, as does a taste that can really affect our moods and our responses. Touch, interesting area. I've been talking to a few people here. I know a lot of you have iPads. We did some really interesting research with Oxford University using brain scanning techniques. And we presented data on a digital screen, and exactly the same data, words and pictures, but exactly the same on a piece of paper. And you look inside the brain and see what's happening. And the mind is lighting up when it's on a piece of paper in ways that don't actually happen so much on a digital screen. So you're able to recall that information better. It creates a more emotional engagement with you on a piece of paper. And I don't know about you, of course I love technology, but I much prefer reading a story on a piece of paper on a book. And it's to do with the way we process information. When we can touch it, it relates that information in time and space for us. So an interesting lesson there, something we need to think about. And what about smell and sound? Far more emotionally engaging. And there is a reason for that. Do you remember we were talking about sight going to the cortex, the outer part of our brain, the sort of mammalian part it's called often? Well, the sense of smell goes to the part of our brain called the limbic system. Psychologists talk about it being the reptilian part of our brain. Or they also talk about the 4 Fs. Forgive me, but in English that stands for fight, flight or running away, food, and procreation. It's our basic instinctual human behavior, but it's where we process 2 important things, our emotions and our memory. And if we think back to those objectives, if we want to be remembered and if we want to tug at the heartstrings, we need to think about this sense. It's very important. Not only that, further research we've been doing actually shows that the more senses you add, you're not adding emotion, you're actually able to multiply emotion. This is really leading-edge research at the moment, and there is psychologists are coming up with this theory that they call super additivity. So it's a multiplying, a synergistic effect, really powerful. Watch this space. So that I believe we should be moving into a world where we're engaging with, and that's been a lot of the talk today, fantastic, creating experiences, delivering value, mobile and interactive, where our audience are. Transmedia, of course, but also 5 senses, multi-sensory transmedia, trans-senses, if you like. And it's about getting through, creating emotional impact and making it stick. So that's why I challenge you today to dare to sense. Very quickly, just some examples of the way that we're doing this. We're creating media posters that actually can project a smell out as you're standing at the bus stop. Sounds can come out of posters that can be linked to interactive TV and media events. These are things that are happening now with SMS competitions linked to that promotion. We can create totally immersive multimedia spaces as you walk through shopping centres. You stand, and as you stand into this space, this sound comes down. Where's it coming from? We can project smells into these spaces. We do sampling with storytelling. It's really becoming quite exciting as far as I'm concerned. But I just want to leave you with my favourite quote, and it's this. Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I might remember. Involve me and I'll understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.